It's August 1st. 84 uncontained large fires are burning across the American West right now, and the agency that tracks every single one of them just raised the national alert to its highest possible level. Level 5. That's the ceiling. That's the number that only gets used when the entire national firefighting system is stretched to its limit, and every available resource in the country is already committed somewhere. Over 6 million acres have burned nationally since the season started, and that number is climbing by the hour. So let's break down exactly what's happening, where it's happening, and why this fire season has become one of the most dangerous stretches the West has seen in years. The National Interagency Fire Center put out its situation report this morning, and the numbers inside it tell you everything you need to know about where things stand. 84 large fires are still uncontained. Only one large fire was contained in the last reporting period. 3 brand new large incidents started just yesterday. 30 complex incident management teams are already deployed, which means the most experienced fire commanders in the country are already spread across the map, and there's basically nobody left in reserve. On top of that, a 15-member incident management team and 59 fire line personnel from Australia and New Zealand have been flown in to help manage fires in the Pacific Northwest. When a country starts importing firefighting teams from the other side of the planet, that tells you the domestic bench has been used up. Before we get into the individual fires, let's talk about the scale here, because the year-over-year comparison is honestly staggering. The 2026 fire season has already burned more than 5.4 million acres just in the active tracking window, and that's a jump of nearly 118% compared to the same point last year. That's not a slight increase. That's more than double. Imagine a wildfire season that's already burned through more land than an entire average year, and it's still only the first day of August, which is historically when fire activity is supposed to be ramping up, not slowing down. If you like a video that treats the data seriously instead of just throwing around scary headlines, that's exactly what we're doing here, so stick with me. And if you find this useful, dropping a like actually helps this reach more people who need to see it. Let's start with Oregon, because right now Oregon is the epicenter of this crisis. The state is sitting on more than 1.2 million acres burned this season alone, spread across 61 active fires. That's not 61 small brush fires either. Multiple fires in Oregon right now are individually larger than some entire past fire seasons in smaller states. The largest fire in the country right now is the Big Grass Fire, sitting on the Oregon-Idaho border in Malheur County. It has already burned past 304,000 acres and is only 21% contained. To put that acreage in perspective, that's a fire footprint larger than the city of Los Angeles. One fire. Not yet a quarter contained, and it's moving fast enough and burning hot enough that Idaho's governor has declared a fire disaster emergency and deployed the National Guard specifically because of it. Level 3 evacuations, meaning go now, don't wait, are in effect across Owyhee County, Idaho, and the surrounding areas because this fire crossed state lines and kept growing. Right behind it is the Coleman Creek Fire in Harney County, Oregon, which has burned past 212,000 acres and currently sits at 0% containment. 0%. That means fire crews haven't been able to establish a single secured line around this fire yet. When you hear 0% containment on a fire that's already over 200,000 acres, that tells you the fire is still actively outrunning suppression efforts, and crews are in a defensive posture rather than an offensive one. Then there's the Cross-White Fire in Wheeler County, which has burned close to 190,000 acres and is nearly half contained at 48%, which is actually one of the better containment numbers on this list, and shows what happens when crews finally get enough resources and cooperative weather to start boxing a fire in. Washington State is right behind Oregon in severity, and this morning the governor made it official. A statewide wildfire emergency has been declared, along with a statewide burn ban, because of the combination of drought conditions, unusually high temperatures, and high winds that are all compounding each other at the same time. Washington currently has 50 active fires burning across the state, totaling more than 600,000 acres. The largest of them, the Kaiser Canyon Fire in Okanogan County, has burned past 131,000 acres and is 30% contained. But it's not the size of Kaiser Canyon that should worry you the most right now. It's what's happening with some of the smaller, faster-moving fires around it. The Sinlahaken Fire, burning about 12 miles west of Tonasket, Washington, is showing what fire behavior analysts call extreme fire behavior, with flanking, crowning, and wind-driven runs. In plain terms, that means the fire isn't just creeping along the ground anymore, it's jumping into the tree canopy and using the wind to launch embers well ahead of the main fire line, which is exactly how fires create new spot fires a mile or more away from where firefighters are actually working. Numerous structures are threatened there right now, and evacuation orders along with road and trail closures are already in effect. A little further south, the Scio Fire near Packwood, Washington, is burning in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest and showing active fire behavior with flanking, backing, and single tree torching, threatening residences directly, with evacuation and area closures already ordered. And up near Enchelium, the Maudrite Fire is showing extreme fire behavior with active crowning. which is serious enough that it now requires 2 separate complex incident management teams just to handle the workload, because the same team is also managing a second nearby incident called the Burdeen Hill Fire. Back in Oregon, 2 more fires round out the top 10 nationally, and both of them tell you something different about how this season is unfolding. The Second Flat Fire, also in Harney County, has burned past 100,000 acres and sits at 18% contained, which puts it in that dangerous middle category, large enough to be a major incident on its own, but still mostly uncontained and capable of significant further growth if wind conditions shift. Then there's the Bald Mountain Fire, another Harney County fire at 85,000 acres and 27% contained. 3 fires over 85,000 acres each, all burning in the same county at the same time, gives you a sense of just how concentrated the pressure has become on fire resources in that specific corner of eastern Oregon. Rounding out the list, the Fox Fire in Baker County has burned past 76,000 acres and is 42% contained. Another fire showing steady, if incomplete, progress. Put those 10 fires together, and you're looking at a combined footprint of well over 1.6 million acres from just the 10 largest incidents in the country, out of 84 uncontained large fires total. That's the scale we're actually dealing with here. Utah is dealing with its own set of major fires, even though the state has fewer active incidents overall, just 9 right now. But those 9 fires have already burned close to 390,000 acres combined. The Babylon Fire in San Juan County has burned over 107,000 acres and is 95% contained, which is genuinely good news, showing that when conditions cooperate, even a fire of that size can be brought under control. The Cottonwood Fire in Beaver County tells the same story. 97,000 acres burned and also 95% contained. So Utah is actually a bit of a bright spot on this list. An example of fires that grew large fast, but are now being successfully wrangled by crews on the ground. Colorado has 15 active fires burning across roughly 252,000 acres. The largest, the Aspen Acres Fire in Custer County, has burned nearly 102,000 acres and is 67% contained. Another example of meaningful progress being made, even while the fire itself remains a serious ongoing incident. Idaho has 22 active fires covering about 143,000 acres, and that number is rising quickly because Idaho is dealing with both its own homegrown ignitions and the spillover from the Big Grass Fire crossing in from Oregon. And even Oklahoma, a state you don't typically associate with major Western-style wildfires, currently has 4 active fires that have already burned close to 128,000 acres. A reminder that this year's dry and hot conditions have expanded the traditional fire zone well beyond the states people usually think of first. So now let's talk about why this is happening, because the why here isn't a mystery. It's written directly into the weather data. Right now, across the southern half of California, the southern Great Basin, and the southwest, temperatures are running between 105 and 120 degrees Fahrenheit, with some pockets locally hitting as high as 125 degrees. That kind of heat alone is dangerous, but it's what's happening alongside the heat that really matters for fire behavior. Relative humidity across inland California, the Great Basin, southwest Wyoming, and the west slope of the Rockies has dropped to somewhere between 3 and 15%. Single-digit humidity. For comparison, a humidity reading that low is closer to what you'd expect in the middle of a desert at noon than what you'd expect across forested mountain terrain. When humidity drops that far, vegetation essentially turns into kindling. Grass, brush, and even standing timber lose whatever moisture was holding them back from burning. It takes almost nothing. A spark from equipment, a dry lightning strike, an ember carried on the wind to set it off. Meanwhile, temperatures near or above 100 degrees are spreading north through northern California, the northern Great Basin, the west slope, and even into Montana, which means the entire footprint of extreme fire weather keeps expanding rather than shrinking. Here's the part that a lot of people miss when they hear about lightning-caused fires. Around the middle of July, 2 major lightning events hit the northwestern United States back-to-back. On July 17th and 18th, a significant round of lightning struck across North Idaho and northwest Montana. Most of the fires that lightning sparked were small at first, under an acre, because the ground still had a little bit of resistance left in it. But then on July 22nd, another lightning event hit, and this time it was followed 2 days later on July 24th by a serious wind event. That combination, fresh ignitions plus high wind, is exactly the recipe that turns a 1-acre smolder into a several hundred-acre run within hours. By the end of July, fires that had started as tiny lightning strikes were reaching hundreds of acres, and new lightning-sparked ignitions were showing up as far east as western North Dakota, which massively widened the entire area fire managers now have to watch. The ignition numbers back this up too. Through July 28th, the daily average number of new wildfire ignitions was 17.9 per day, up from 16.6 per day in June. Now, on its own, that might not sound dramatic, but here's the context that makes it matter. The historical daily ignition average for this same window, going all the way back to 2008, is 24.6 per day. So on the surface, ignitions are actually running below the long-term historical average. But acreage burned is running far above average. What does that tell you? It tells you that fewer fires are starting, but the fires that do start are burning far more intensely and spreading far more aggressively once they catch, because the fuel is so dry and the wind and heat are giving every single ignition the best possible conditions to explode into a major fire. Fewer sparks, bigger fires. That's the pattern defining this entire season. By July 18th, national fire activity had escalated so sharply that the National Preparedness Level was raised all the way to 5, the maximum level on the scale, and it happened because of exactly the pattern we just walked through. The lightning events in the Northwest combined with already dry fuel conditions across the Great Basin, the Rocky Mountains, and the Southwest. As of July 31st, the running national total sat at more than 6 million acres burned, and that number has only grown since. If you're new here and you want to actually understand how these numbers connect, instead of just seeing scary headlines pop up on your feed, go ahead and subscribe, because we're going to keep tracking this as containment numbers shift over the coming weeks. Now, let's talk about their response, because this is genuinely one of the largest mobilizations of firefighting resources you'll see in a single season. 30 complex incident management teams are currently committed, which is the top tier of fire command structure, typically reserved for the largest and most dangerous fires in the country. When you have 30 of those teams deployed simultaneously, that means the system is running close to its maximum organizational capacity. On top of the domestic teams, the 15-member incident management team and 59 fire line personnel from Australia and New Zealand are now working large fires in the Northwest area specifically, an arrangement that exists because wildfire agencies around the world have reciprocal agreements to send help when another country's fire season peaks at a different time than their own. Australia and New Zealand's fire seasons run opposite to ours, which is exactly why their crews are available to come help right now. In the air, the Air Force has activated its modular airborne firefighting system known as MAFISS, which turns military C-130 cargo planes into air tankers capable of dropping thousands of gallons of retardant in a single pass. 2 MAFs-equipped C-130s from the 302nd Airlift Wing, an Air Force reserve unit out of Colorado, have been deployed to Klamath Falls, Oregon to support operations there. Separately, 1 MAF's C-130 from the 153rd Airlift Wing, part of the Wyoming Air National Guard, and another from the 146th Airlift Wing, part of the California Air National Guard, have been sent to Redding, California, to support wildland fire operations nationally from that base. When military aircraft get pulled into a civilian wildfire response like this, it's not a symbolic gesture. It means the civilian aerial firefighting fleet, the private contract air tankers and helicopters that normally handle this work, are already fully tasked, and additional lift capacity is needed just to keep up with demand. Let's talk about what's actually threatened on the ground, because behind every containment percentage and acreage number, there are real communities directly in the path of these fires. In Washington, the Sinlehekin Fire has numerous structures threatened with active evacuation orders in place. Near Frenchtown, Montana, the Elder One Fire is threatening energy infrastructure, which is a category fire managers watch especially closely because it can mean power lines, substations, or fuel storage sitting directly in a fire's path. Near Olney, Montana, the Skillet Fire is showing active fire behavior with group torching, spotting, and wind-driven runs, and it's threatening both residences and railroad infrastructure, meaning rail lines that carry freight and, in some cases, hazardous materials through that corridor. Near Port Hill, Idaho, the Upper Smith Fire is threatening both structures and energy infrastructure simultaneously, and it's being managed by the same incident command team that's also handling a separate fire called Elder One, which again shows how thin resources are being stretched when a single command team has to run 2 active incidents at once. Oregon has taken a particularly hard hit on the human impact side of this. The state has already invoked its 11th conflagration declaration of the year for the Grasshopper Fire. A conflagration declaration in Oregon is a specific legal mechanism that activates the state's fire mobilization plan, pulling in structural firefighting resources from cities and towns across the state to help protect property directly in a wildfire's path, above and beyond the normal wildland firefighting response. 11 of those declarations in a single year is an extraordinary number, and it reflects just how many fires this season have grown large enough, fast enough, to directly threaten populated areas rather than staying contained to remote wildland. Statewide, close to 24,000 Oregon residents are currently under some form of evacuation notice, whether that's a Be Ready advisory, a Beset warning, or a Go Now order. 24,000 people is roughly the population of a small city, all displaced or on standby to leave their homes at the same time because of fire activity spread across dozens of different incidents statewide. Let's zoom out for a second and talk about what this season actually represents in the bigger picture, because there's a strategic thread running through all of this that's worth connecting. This isn't a story about one bad fire in one bad location. It's a story about an entire region hitting multiple stress points at the same time. You've got extended drought that's dried out fuels across multiple states. You've got a heat pattern pushing well past 100 degrees across a huge geographic footprint, from the desert southwest all the way north into Montana. You've got humidity readings in the single digits over enormous stretches of terrain. And then you've got the ignition source, lightning, arriving in 2 separate major waves in mid to late July, hitting ground that was already primed to burn. When you stack drought, heat, low humidity, and lightning on top of each other in the same 3 to 4 week window, you don't get a normal fire season. You get exactly what we're watching right now, a National Preparedness Level 5 event with 84 uncontained large fires and international crews being flown in to help. And here's the piece that connects directly to what comes next. The National Interagency Fire Center's own August Outlook, published in the same set of documents as this morning's situation report, forecasts that significant fire potential will remain above normal across most of the northwestern United States through the entire month of August. That includes central Utah, northwest Colorado, western Wyoming, northwest Montana, and stretches all the way west to the Pacific Northwest coast and into northeast California. In other words, this isn't a season that's expected to be peaking right now and cooling off. August, historically, the single most dangerous month of the entire wildfire calendar, because it combines peak heat with maximum fuel dryness, is being forecast to bring more of the same, or worse, across almost the exact same footprint we just walked through fire by fire. So if the last month brought us to National Preparedness Level 5 and 84 uncontained large fires, the honest question worth sitting with is, what does a month forecast to be equally or more severe do to a firefighting system that's already running at its ceiling, with 30 command teams committed and international reinforcements already in the country? It helps to put this season next to past ones to understand just how unusual the current trajectory is. The 2024 wildfire season, which was already considered a rough year, ended with just under 65,000 total fires and close to 8.9 million acres burned nationally across the entire year, with 11 deaths and over 4,500 structures destroyed. This season has already burned more than 6 million acres, and it isn't even at the halfway point of the calendar year yet, with August, historically the worst month, still just beginning. Go back further to 2020, the year that produced California's first ever recorded gigafire, the August Complex, which alone burned more than 1 million acres. And you'll remember that the entire western wildfire season that year ended with just over 10 million acres burned and 47 direct deaths across California, Oregon, Washington, and Arizona combined, plus an estimated 1,000 to 3,000 additional deaths linked to smoke inhalation. The reason that comparison matters isn't to say this season will definitely surpass those totals. It's to show that this season's pace, more than double last year's acreage, at the same point in the calendar, is tracking toward the kind of numbers usually associated with the worst fire years on record, not an average one. An acreage burned isn't the only way these fires reach people who are nowhere near the flames themselves. Smoke from fires burning across Oregon, Idaho, and California has already been drifting hundreds of miles into neighboring states, showing up on satellite imagery over Montana and the northern Rockies well before the fires themselves ever get close. That smoke plume travel matters because air quality doesn't respect state lines or fire perimeters. Communities that are nowhere near an evacuation zone can still end up breathing hazardous air for days or weeks at a time, simply because they happen to sit downwind of a major fire complex. With extreme heat already stressing hospitals and emergency services across multiple states this summer, adding widespread smoke exposure into the mix compounds public health risk well beyond the immediate fire perimeters we've been walking through. Let's also talk briefly about containment, because it's easy to look at containment percentages and misread what they actually mean. Containment doesn't mean a fire is out, and it doesn't even mean a fire has stopped growing. It means a certain percentage of the fire's perimeter has a secured control line around it, a line that firefighters are confident will hold even under continued fire pressure. A fire can be listed at, say, 30% contained and still be actively growing on the uncontained side, which is exactly what's happening with several of the fires we covered today. The Kaiser Canyon Fire in Washington at 30% and the Crosswhite Fire in Oregon at 48% are both examples of fires where real progress has been made on part of the perimeter, while the rest of the fire is still an active, unpredictable threat. Compare that to the Babylon and Cottonwood fires in Utah, both sitting at 95% containment, which genuinely does mean those fires are close to being fully secured. The spread between 0%, like the Coleman Creek Fire, and 95%, like Babylon and Cottonwood, tells you just how differently individual fires are behaving even within the same national event, depending on terrain, local weather, and how quickly resources could be brought to bear on each one. It's also worth understanding why so many of these fires are proving so difficult to fully contain, even with 30 command teams and international support on the ground. A lot of it comes down to the terrain itself. Fires like Elder One and Skillet in Montana are burning through mixed timber, brush, and what's called closed timber litter, dense ground debris under a forest canopy that burns hot and is genuinely difficult and dangerous for ground crews to work directly. Add steep mountain terrain, limited road access in a lot of these areas, and wind patterns that can shift direction with very little warning, and you start to understand why containment lines that took days to build can fail in a matter of hours when conditions turn. This is also exactly why aerial resources like those MAFS C-130s matter so much in a season like this one. When ground crews can't safely get a direct line on a fire because of terrain or fire intensity, aircraft dropping retardant or water become one of the only tools left to slow a fire's spread long enough for ground teams to get in and finish the job safely. There's another layer to the fuel story worth understanding because it explains why fires this year are behaving so aggressively, even in areas that don't look unusually dry on paper. Fire behavior analysts track something called energy release component, essentially a measure of how much potential energy is locked up in the available fuel on the ground. Across most of the Pacific Northwest right now, that measure is sitting at average to above average levels. At lower elevations, the living vegetation, the grasses and brush that would normally still hold some moisture this time of year, has already fully cured, meaning it's dried out completely and is now behaving just like dead fuel when it comes to how easily it ignites and how fast it burns. At higher elevations, the picture is a little more mixed, with some green vegetation still hanging on, especially on north and east facing slopes that get less direct sun. But that protective effect is fading fast. Every additional stretch of hot, dry weather cures more of that remaining green fuel, which means the buffer that's been slowing fire spread at higher elevations is shrinking week by week, and more of the landscape is becoming available to burn. It's also worth understanding the resource strain this creates beyond just personnel and aircraft. Every one of these 84 uncontained large fires requires a dedicated allocation of engines, hand crews, bulldozers, water tenders, and logistics support, on top of the incident management team running the operation. When 30 complex incident management teams are already committed nationally, and new large incidents keep starting, in this case 3 new ones just yesterday, fire managers are forced into a constant triage process, deciding in real time which fires get priority for the next available strike team, which fires get downgraded to a lower staffing level because they're not immediately threatening structures, and which fires simply get monitored from the air until resources free up elsewhere. That's part of why you see fires like the Coleman Creek Fire sitting at 0% containment despite having burned past 200,000 acres. It's not necessarily that crews haven't been able to make progress. It's that in a season with this many simultaneous major incidents, every fire is competing against 83 others for the same finite pool of engines, aircraft, and experienced commanders. One more angle worth covering here because it doesn't get talked about enough. Every one of these numbers, the acreage, the containment percentages, the number of active fires, comes from a single source that updates multiple times a day, the National Interagency Fire Center Situation Report, built directly from data reported by federal, state, tribal, and local fire agencies across the country. That's not a random estimate pulled from a newswire, it's the actual operational tracking system that fire commanders themselves are using to allocate resources in real time, which is exactly why a number like 84 uncontained large fires and a preparedness level of 5 carries so much weight. That's not commentary. That's the system's own internal read on how stretched it currently is. So where does this leave things heading into the rest of August? Based on everything in this morning's report, on the outlook data, and on how quickly this season has already outpaced last year's numbers, expect this to keep escalating before it improves. The core ingredients driving the season, extended drought, extreme heat spreading further north by the week, humidity readings low enough to turn standing vegetation into fuel almost instantly, and a lightning pattern that's already proven capable of igniting dozens of new fires in a matter of days, none of those conditions are expected to meaningfully change in the immediate term. The August outlook itself says as much, forecasting above normal significant fire potential across nearly the entire footprint we just covered. That means the communities in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, Utah, and Colorado that are already dealing with evacuation notices, conflagration declarations, and threatened infrastructure should expect this to remain an active, evolving situation, not a crisis that's about to wind down. Even the fires that aren't making national headlines matter here, because this is a season defined by volume as much as by any single record-breaking blaze. 84 uncontained large fires means 84 separate communities, watersheds, power grids, and stretches of highway that are all facing some level of direct risk at the same time. Light initial attack activity was still logged overnight, 117 new fire starts, which crews were able to catch and suppress quickly before they grew into large incidents. That's actually the system working the way it's supposed to. The concern isn't the fires getting caught early. It's what happens on the next hot, dry, windy day when initial attack crews, already stretched thin, supporting the 84 large fires already burning, can't get to a new ignition fast enough before it takes off. That's the tightrope fire agencies are walking every single day right now, and it's exactly why the preparedness level sits at 5 instead of 4 or 3. The system isn't failing, but it has almost no slack left in it, and an outlook forecasting above normal fire potential for the rest of August means that slack isn't likely to return anytime soon. If you found this breakdown useful, especially if you've got family, friends, or property anywhere across the affected states, share this with them, because containment numbers and evacuation zones shift fast in a season like this one, and having an accurate, updated picture matters. Drop a comment with which fire you're watching most closely, or which state you want a deeper follow-up on, because there's a lot more happening on the ground in each of these individual incidents than we could fully cover in one video. And if you want to stay updated as these numbers change over the next few weeks, subscribe and turn on notifications, because National Preparedness Level 5 events like this one tend to move fast, and containment lines that hold today can fail tomorrow if the wind turns. Thanks for watching, and we'll keep tracking this one as it develops.